My son's wife turned my brand new cabin into a free hotel for her whole family, without asking me a single thing. 5 days later, a sheriff's car pulled into my driveway, and the same people who treated my home like a playground went silent real fast. They thought I was just the quiet old man in the corner, until they saw the paperwork I'd been preparing in absolute silence. Before I go any further, I want to thank you for sitting with me. Stories like this don't come easy at my age. They sit in your chest for years until you finally let them breathe. If you'd like to hear more of the things I've carried quietly, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. Your support doesn't just help the channel. It reminds an old man that his voice still matters. You know, when you reach a certain age, peace becomes a kind of treasure. Not the loud kind. Not excitement or adventure. Just peace. Something steady enough for your heart to rest on. That was all I wanted when I bought that little cabin in Redwood Ridge. A quiet place tucked between tall pines, with a porch wide enough for one rocking chair and maybe a second, if life surprised me. I'd spent 69 years working jobs folks don't brag about. Maintenance work. Freight unloading. Winter shifts where your fingers sting until they stop feeling like fingers. Jobs that kept the lights on. Jobs that made my son's life easier than mine ever was. I wasn't a perfect man, but I showed up. Every day. Rain, snow, sickness. It didn't matter. And when my wife passed, I raised Evan alone. Not gracefully, just fully. I remember nights when I'd pack his lunch for the next morning, then notice I hadn't eaten dinner myself. Fathers love quietly. Sometimes you don't realize how heavy the years were until you finally set them down. So when I signed the papers for that cabin, paid for with money saved one shift at a time, I felt something loosen inside me. A breath I didn't know I'd been holding for decades. It wasn't big. It wasn't modern. But it was mine. No borrowed rooms. No shared kitchens. Just mine. Those first 3 days felt like a warm memory I got to live in real time. I unpacked slowly, the way an old man unties a ribbon on a long-awaited gift. Folded shirts into the dresser. Hung the pot rack near the window. Placed my wife's photo on the mantel, her smile catching the soft afternoon light. I woke up before dawn each morning, heated water for tea, and sat on the back steps watching fog drift through the cedar trunks. My knees ached, sure, but the rest of me felt lighter than it had in years. That little cabin wasn't just shelter. It was the first place in a long time that felt like it had room for me. Evan visited the day I moved in. A short visit, but a warm one. He hugged me, told me he was proud, then added, "Dad, just give us time. Mara takes a while to warm up to change." I nodded. I understood. Or at least, I thought I did. Mara, my daughter-in-law, was a complicated woman. Sharp, organized, always planning something. Her family was big, loud, and everywhere all at once. Not cruel, just unaware. Unaware of boundaries. Unaware of the difference between can we and we will. But I didn't think much about that in those first quiet days. I swept the porch. Fixed a loose hinge, straightened the pantry. Counted the spare chairs the last owner left behind, 20 in total. I chuckled when I counted them. What on earth would I ever do with 20 chairs? I whispered. I didn't know then. Not yet. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of sawdust and new paint. The refrigerator hummed like it had known me forever. I felt settled in a way I hadn't felt since before my wife got sick. That afternoon, I changed the sheets in the spare room, just in case Evan wanted to stay over sometime. I laid a clean towel at the foot of the bed, the way my mother used to when guests came to stay. Small things. Quiet rituals that make a place feel lived in. The sun was sliding across the living room floor, turning everything warm and golden, when I sat down with a fresh cup of tea. My lower back throbbed a little, but even that ache felt softer in my new home. Everything felt gentle. I didn't sense a storm coming. Didn't feel the walls shift. Didn't hear the warning that life was about to tilt. I just rocked in that old chair, tracing the rim of my cup, believing the peace I'd earned would last. But life has a way of changing on an ordinary morning, without thunder, without hints, without mercy. And as I sat there, letting the steam rise against the window, I had no idea the phone would ring the very next day, and that call would take that peace I'd worked so hard to build and shake it right out of the walls. I didn't know it then, but that quiet evening at the table was the last real peace I'd feel for a long, long time. The phone rang the next morning while I was unpacking a box of old linens, the ones my wife embroidered back when her hands were still steady. I hadn't even unfolded the first pillowcase when the call came in. I didn't check the screen. Only 2 people ever call me that early. My doctor and my daughter-in-law. And my doctor doesn't talk fast. "Hey, Alden," Mara said, already speaking like she was running late. "Just a heads up, we're on the road. We'll be there in about 2 hours. My hand stayed inside the box. "Who's we?" I asked, though something in my stomach already knew the answer. "Oh," she said lightly. "My whole side of the family, 18 of us. I told them you had the space." The words didn't hit like a slap. They hit like settling snow, quiet, heavy, inevitable. Before I could process it, she kept going. "If you could get the rooms ready, that'd be great. And, food. Obviously." Obviously. She said it the way people mention weather. The way people assume things they've never earned. "No, is this okay? No, do you need help?" Not even a congratulations on the new place, just assumption. I set the pillowcase down, smoothing the crease with my thumb. 2 hours, 18 people, in a cabin I'd barely had time to call my own. "All right," I said quietly. It wasn't agreement, not surrender. Just the word a man gives when he knows his opinion isn't being asked for. When the call ended, I stood still for a long moment, the room tilting just slightly. The walls of that little cabin seemed to inhale, then hold their breath. I didn't shout, didn't curse, didn't call Evan to demand answers. Old men learn something over time. Noise doesn't solve much. But clarity? Clarity sets the stage. I walked to the kitchen, slid a yellow notepad onto the counter, and drew a long line down the middle. Left side, food, towels, trash bags, sleeping arrangements. Right side, rules, occupancy codes, documentation, enforcement. I underlined documentation twice, not because I planned revenge, but because I finally understood the pattern. See, when my wife died, Evan said, "Dad, stay with us until you get your footing." And I believed him. I wanted to believe him. But footing doesn't take 6 years to find. 6 years in their basement. 6 years folding laundry that wasn't mine. 6 years packing lunches, repairing leaky faucets, picking up the slack no one else noticed. Mara loved to remind me, "We're not charging you rent," but they collected plenty. My time, my silence, my willingness to disappear so their lives ran smoother. And I let it happen, not because I was weak, because I loved my son, and because old habits, especially the humble ones, are hard to break. But this? Her claiming my new home before I'd even unpacked the sheets? That was different. I went room to room, preparing beds and wiping counters, not out of hospitality, out of awareness. 18 people were coming. People who didn't ask. People who assumed. I folded towels the way my wife used to, crisp corners, neat stacks. Then paused, looking at them. Half would vanish. The rest wouldn't come back clean. I moved to the kitchen, wiping crumbs from the counter though no one had eaten there yet. Then I stopped. Something inside me clicked, quiet but firm. This wasn't about towels or food. This was about ownership. About the simple human right to say, "This is mine." I opened the drawer where I kept my important documents, birth certificate, insurance papers, the deed to the cabin, my name. Only mine. The first thing I'd owned alone since before Evan was born. I held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it. A man's entire history can sit in a single sheet of paper. Then I made one short phone call. "Deputy Hamlin," he answered. "Morning, Ross," I said, voice steady. "I'd like more information on occupancy limits for private cabins." There was a beat of silence. Then he asked gently, "Everything all right, Mr. Price?" I looked at the boxes still half-packed, the teacup untouched by the window. "Not yet," I said, "but it will be." I hung up and finished making the beds, every corner tucked, every pillow fluffed, every surface clean. Not for their comfort, for my clarity. By the time I finished, something inside me had settled. Not like anger, more like gravity. They were coming whether I liked it or not. But what happened after they arrived? That part would finally be up to me. I stood in the doorway of the spare room, watching the afternoon light stretch across the floorboards. And in that quiet I felt it, the thing younger people forget elders still have. Resolve, not loud, not angry, just steady, the kind that can wait as long as it needs to. The kind that can't be pushed over anymore. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten a thing. But something inside me went very, very still. They arrived like a rising tide, loud, fast, spilling into every inch of space before I could even step off the porch. 3 SUVs, 2 vans, doors slamming, voices overlapping. It felt less like a family visit and more like an occupation. 18 people. All of them strangers to the cabin. All of them carrying the kind of confidence you only see in folks who assume the world is already waiting for them. I stood there, hands tucked into my sleeves, watching coolers and backpacks roll across my gravel driveway. Some nodded politely. Most didn't. One woman waved like she was greeting a distant neighbor she couldn't quite place. Within minutes, my home, my brand new home, stopped feeling like mine. Someone opened my refrigerator as casually as breathing. A suitcase dragged across the wooden floor, leaving a long scratch that caught the light. 2 teenagers raced past me, arguing about which room had the better vibe. Mara's aunt, who I'd met twice, walked straight into the master bedroom, tossed her purse on the quilt and said, "This'll work," didn't ask. Didn't look my way, didn't need to. This wasn't a visit. This was a takeover. I heard a door slam upstairs, followed by laughter and music coming from someone's portable speaker. Another cousin asked loudly, "Is there Wi-Fi?" before even removing their shoes. I cleared my throat. A soft old man cough. No one heard. Or maybe no one cared. Then Evan appeared, hair rumpled, eyes heavy with sleep. He gave me that same helpless half-smile he's used his whole life when he doesn't want to choose sides. "Dad," he said softly, "just let them settle in. It's only 2 weeks." 2 weeks. I felt the words land, heavy, familiar. Another version of just until you get your footing. Another quiet dismissal. But that wasn't the worst part. It was the ease. The certainty that this cabin existed for them. Like my place in their world was to stay out of the way and keep things running smoothly. Someone grabbed the last clean towel from the basket I'd prepared. Another person asked where the extra bedding was, as if every cabin came with a storage room labeled for guests who didn't ask. I walked into the kitchen, opened the cabinet with my wife's floral dishes, and saw 3 plates missing. 2 glasses gone. 1 bowl cracked near the sink. A small thing. But small things add up in an old man's heart. Still, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand respect. I didn't call everyone to the living room and deliver a speech. That's not how older men win battles. We watch. We listen. We collect the truth quietly. That evening, after the noise finally settled and the house drifted into the half-sleep of too many bodies breathing too close, I sat at the dining table with a cold cup of tea. The room around me felt unfamiliar, like my home was wearing someone else's face. Crumbs dotted the floor. A sticky ring stained the counter near the bread box. The bathroom faucet, once a gentle drip, now sprayed sideways. A chair leaned unevenly, its leg cracked. But the real mess was the one I felt inside. I'd worked almost 7 decades for one thing that was truly mine, and in less than a day it had been swallowed whole. I traced the rim of my mug with a slow, stiff finger. My yellow notepad lay beside me. The left column, food, bedding, supplies, was crossed out. Done, like a duty fulfilled. But the right column, rules, laws, documentation, stayed pristine. Waiting. Not forgotten. Not abandoned. Waiting. Something inside me, the old part, the patient part, began turning gears. I picked up my pen. Not with anger. Not with trembling. With steadiness. I logged every broken fixture, every missing item, every spilled drink, every crossed boundary. I checked occupancy codes I'd bookmarked earlier. I reviewed the cabin rules the previous owner left behind. I even reread the county guidelines on lodging and authorization, not to catch them, not to harm them, to see clearly. And once a man sees clearly, he can't pretend he's blind anymore. My gaze drifted to my wife's photo on the mantel, her gentle smile, her patient eyes. For a moment, it felt like she was sitting across from me, nursing a mug of tea, waiting for me to say the truth out loud. "I know," I whispered to her reflection. "You wouldn't have let this go either." A lump tightened in my throat. Not grief, not regret. Just release. I closed the notepad with a slow, deliberate motion. The soft thud felt final, like a door quietly shutting. Then I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the row of vehicles in the driveway, engines cooling, steel reflecting the porch light. My reflection stared back. Older, yes, but steadier than I'd felt in years. I guess it's time I get my house back, I murmured. The plan wasn't lightning, it wasn't fire, it wasn't revenge. It was clarity, and clarity is a powerful thing in an old man's hands. Some nights I caught myself whispering their names, not in anger, just in disbelief. The next morning, the cabin didn't feel loud. It felt heavy. The kind of heaviness a house carries when too many people sleep under its roof without gratitude. I stepped over a trail of cracker crumbs leading from the couch to the porch. Someone had spilled juice on the rug and flipped it over, like the underside could hide disrespect. A chair wobbled with a cracked leg. My bathroom faucet, once dripping, now sprayed crookedly, water hitting the wall like someone had tried to fix it and made it worse. But my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I didn't criticize anyone. Didn't chase down who broke what. Didn't ask why the last towel was taken, or why a stranger's shoes were drying near my heater. Old men learn something younger folks don't. You don't need to shout when you already know the truth. I made my coffee slowly and sat down at the dining table, the yellow notepad waiting like an old friend. Then I began again. Damage log, updated. Occupancy count, confirmed. Noise violations, listed. Expenses, clipped neatly with receipts. I wasn't planning an argument. I was building a record, and with every line I wrote, I felt something inside me settle. Not anger, not fire, something steadier, something anchored. By mid-morning, the idea had taken shape, clean and sharp as mountain air. If they insisted on treating my cabin like a hotel, then I would treat them like hotel guests. Not out of spite, out of boundaries, out of a dignity I should have protected long before now. I opened my laptop and searched short-term lodging agreements, Colorado rural cabins. Most templates were too complicated or meant for big rentals. But then I found one simple enough to fit exactly what I needed. A straightforward form meant for small private cabins, with clear sections for nightly rates, damages, occupancy limits, and deposits. I downloaded it without hesitation. My hands didn't tremble. My breath didn't shake. It felt like filling out any other form, except this one carried the weight of 6 quiet years. I typed, Alden Price Redwood Ridge Cabin, $155 per person per night. Full deposit required, damages billed separately, signatures mandatory before stay continues. Then I printed 18 copies. The printer hummed like a slow heartbeat, sheet after sheet sliding out. I placed each one on the table, stacking them neatly, a small tower of overdue respect. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I needed something stronger than paper. I needed enforcement. So I made the call. Deputy Hamlin, he answered. Morning, Ross, I said, trying not to sound like a man who'd been stepped on one too many times. I'd like to follow up on those occupancy limits for private cabins. He paused, the way a man pauses when he hears trouble behind someone's voice. Are they giving you issues? He asked. I looked around at the mess, at the belongings tossed carelessly, at the calm I'd lost but intended to reclaim. They're giving the house issues, I said quietly. Ross understood more than I explained. Good officers usually do. Well, Mr. Price, he said, you have every right to require written lodging agreements. If they refuse, they can be asked to vacate. I can stop by if needed. Tomorrow morning, I replied. They'll all be here. He agreed without judgment, just duty. When the call ended, I walked through the cabin with a clear, steady focus, the kind an older man earns through years of swallowing his pride until he finally decides enough is enough. Upstairs, the teens still hadn't made their beds. Pizza crusts dried on the windowsill. A portable speaker thumped faintly from an open backpack. I didn't speak, didn't correct, didn't warn. I simply observed. For the first time, the truth didn't hurt, it clarified. Back downstairs, a cousin rummaged in the pantry and groaned, No oat milk? I smiled gently. Not today. He shrugged and walked off, as if I were an inconvenience inside my own kitchen. And that tiny shrug, that was when the story's title echoed back through my mind. My son's wife turned my cabin into a free hotel, so I sent her the final bill. The bill wasn't revenge. It was accountability. And accountability is a language most people don't expect from someone who stays quiet. By evening, the contracts lay arranged across the dining table, 18 little monuments to the line I was finally drawing. Each stack had a pen, Each stack waited for a signature that would likely never come. The house grew still as the day faded. Not peaceful stillness, anticipation. I taped 2 notices onto the front door. Private property short-term lodging agreement. Required for all non-owner occupants fare. Legal. Necessary. Before bed, I stepped out onto the porch and breathed in the cold mountain air. The pines rustled softly. The sky stretched dark and wide. Somewhere far away, a coyote called out. "It's time," I whispered. Not time for shouting, not time for anger. Time to reclaim the years of respect I'd let slip. I went to bed with the calm of a man who had done every step right. The cabin didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt ready. They had no idea that silence can build walls stronger than any argument. I woke before sunrise. Old habit. Old bones. Old instinct that trouble always reaches the door before daylight. The cabin was quiet, but not the good kind. It was the kind of quiet a house is after too many people have breathed inside it. Thick, used, heavy. Even the walls felt tired. I brewed my coffee slow and steady, letting the warmth settle into my palms. Then I set the mug on the dining table beside the 18 printed lodging agreements. Each stack neat. Each pen lined up. Each paper waiting for a truth no one expected me to enforce. Right on time, gravel cracked under tires. Deputy Ross Hamlin. Steady man, fair man. The kind of man who understands more than you say out loud. He stepped out of the county vehicle, straightened his jacket, and nodded.
"Morning, Mr. Price." "Morning,"
I said quietly.
"Thank you for coming."
Inside, I heard the soft stir of bodies waking, doors opening, floors creaking, distant yawns of people who had slept comfortably under a roof that wasn't theirs. And then Mara appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in a hoodie she didn't own. She blinked at the table, at the contracts, at the notices on the entryway, at the officer standing calmly beside me. "What is this?" she asked. I gestured toward the papers. "Lodging agreements." She gave a short laugh, the kind that carries more irritation than amusement. "Okay, very funny." But I didn't smile, didn't move, didn't offer the comfort she expected. She picked up one of the agreements. Her eyes skimmed the first lines. Then the nightly rate, then the deposit section, then the damages clause. Her breath caught. "You're serious," she whispered. Before I could answer, Ross stepped forward, voice steady. "Ma'am, the property owner has the right to require written agreements for all non-owner occupants. Your group exceeded the legal limit and entered without formal permission." Her face drained of color. "You called the police on your own family?" she snapped. I shook my head gently. "No, I called the county office. This is enforcement." Then Evan appeared, rubbing sleep from his eyes, still half wrapped in the comfort of assuming everything would be handled for him. He looked at the papers, at the pens, at the officer, then at me. His face shifted. "Dad, what is all this?" he asked quietly. "Boundaries," I said. My voice calm enough to make the word feel heavier. People began coming out of bedrooms, confused faces, annoyed whispers, arms crossed like shields. Cousin grabbed a contract and muttered, "This can't be real." Another asked, "Are we being evicted?" A teenage boy groaned, "This old guy's insane." Ross cleared his throat. "Everyone staying here will need to sign the agreement or vacate the property by sundown. Terms are clear, nightly rate, damages, deposit. All lawful." Murmurs. Grumbles. Shock spreading like a slow wave. And then Mara's aunt, the loud one, the self-appointed spokesperson of entitlement, snatched up a contract. "You think you can charge us like some kind of Airbnb?" she barked. I looked at her steadily. "This isn't an Airbnb," I said. "It's my home, and you treated it like a free hotel." The room stilled. "This is family," she snapped back. I shook my head, soft but firm. "No, I am Evan's family. The rest of you are guests. And guests ask." A new silence settled. Thin, sharp, undeniable. Evan stepped closer, hands sliding to his hips. "Dad, this is too much. They're just staying for 6 years, Evan," I said quietly. 6 years I lived in your basement. 6 years I cooked, cleaned, fixed everything that broke. I never asked for rent. Not once. But you let them walk in here like I owed them something." His eyes dropped. The truth landed where excuses couldn't reach. Ross opened a folder. "I have the recorded call, documentation, and county guidelines," he said. "Everything is lawful and proceeds with your consent, Mr. Price." Mara stared at me like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her. "You recorded our call?" she whispered. "Yes," I said softly. "For clarity. No anger, no spite, just truth." A cousin cursed under her breath. Someone else began packing without a word. One teenager slammed a bedroom door so hard the frame rattled. By noon, the decision was clear. They weren't going to pay. Not the rate, not the deposit, not even an apology, so they packed. Fast, suitcases rolled down the hall. Coolers banged against railings. Bags zipped angrily. Feet stomped across gravel. Someone knocked over my potted fern on the way out. Didn't stop. Didn't care. One of the younger cousins rolled down a van window and yelled, "You'll die alone." I didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just stood there on the porch, hands resting on the railing. Because loneliness isn't about who leaves. Loneliness is about who stays and treats you like nothing. Mara approached last, arms crossed tight. "You made this hostile," she said. I met her eyes. "No," I replied. I made it clear. Evan didn't look at me. He got into the car and stared straight ahead. Their vehicles rolled down the driveway, engines revving like wounded pride. The dust settled slowly behind them. And when the last one disappeared around the bend, I stepped inside, placed my hand on the top contract, and exhaled, a long, quiet breath I'd been holding for far too many years. And in that silence, I finally felt free. After they drove off, the cabin felt different. Not wounded, just quiet in a way I hadn't heard since the day I moved in. A soft, honest quiet, the kind that doesn't ask anything of you. I walked through the room slowly, hands folded behind my back like an old man strolling through memory. Towels lay crumpled on the bathroom floor. A makeup bag sat tipped in the sink, leaving powder like chalk dust on the counter. A slice of cold pizza crust rested on the windowsill, abandoned mid-bite. I didn't pick up a thing, not out of spite, just peace. Those messes weren't mine to clean anymore. The next morning, I hired a cleaning service. 2 kind women showed up with steady hands and gentle voices. I made them tea, thanked them, and stepped aside while they worked. While they restored the cabin, I restored something inside myself. I photographed the damages, saved the receipts, finished the itemized log I'd been building quietly since the day they arrived. Then I sent Mara the final invoice, clear, complete, attached with the very lodging agreement she skimmed without care. No anger, no lecture, just facts. And I didn't wait for a reply. The days that followed felt like slow healing. I replanted the garden where their folding chairs had sunk into the soil, reset the stepping stones they'd knocked loose, opened all the windows just to let the mountain air settle back where it belonged. I made coffee in my own kitchen and let it sit warm without anyone asking, "Is there more?" I sat on the porch and listened to the pines whisper like old friends. For the first time in years, my life fit me again. A week later, I met with my lawyer. We didn't change the ownership, just added a new clause to the deed. Inheritance is contingent upon demonstrated respect. A simple sentence, but a lifetime's worth of meaning. It wasn't punishment. It was clarity. A map for the people who had mistaken my silence for weakness. Mara called a few times after that. Evan, too. No voicemails. Just missed calls and short messages asking if we could talk. But I didn't feel urgency, didn't feel guilt, didn't feel small. Because this story, the one titled "My Son's Wife Turned My Cabin into a Free Hotel, so I sent her the final bill," was never about money. It was about remembering myself and letting the world adjust to that memory. Maybe that's what age teaches you. You can't control who respects you, but you can control who has access to your peace. That evening I sat on the porch with a warm cup in my hands, watching the wind move through the pines like they were nodding back at me. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt something simple and rare. Home. Maybe justice isn't loud or fast. Maybe it's finally being able to sleep without wondering who's holding your life in their hands. What would you have done in my place? If my stories keep you company, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and share your thoughts with me.